Good morning, everybody. I'm Joe Horscapture, Vice President of Native Collections and Amundsen Curator of Native History and Culture, and welcome to the Resources Center. This is our first event in our new facility, and we are so happy that everybody is here today. In true Hollywood fashion, we have an in-person audience and over 200 people watching on Zoom from across the country. We sent out over 70 notifications to tribal colleges and tribal museums, hoping they can be part of this event. If so, welcome and thank you for being here. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians for the financial support of the seminar. And honestly, it is so great to see so many friends here today who have traveled long distances to share their knowledge with us today. From deep in my heart, I thank you so much. So for our opening remarks, I'd like to introduce Lynn Valbuena, Chairperson of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. Lynn began her public service career as Secretary of the San Bernardino Indian Center after earning her business degree in 1974. For her tribe, she served as Secretary-Treasurer on the Business Committee from 1992 to 1994 and as Tribal Chairwoman from 1994 to 1996. Valbuena currently is serving her 12th year as Chairwoman for the Tribal Alliance of Sovereign Indian Nations, which includes 14 federally recognized tribes located within the Federal Central Judicial District within the state of California. She is a key decision maker in the development and implementation of their legislative strategies. She was recently re-elected to serve her sixth two-year term as Executive Secretary of the Washington, D.C.-based National Indian Gaming Association. Valbuena is in her seventh year as member of the Advisory Council for the Board of Directors for the American Indian Chamber of Commerce. 25 years. Clearly, I'm going to have to figure out my notes here. In 2001, the Chamber presented her with a prestigious Warrior Award for her leadership in Indian country. Please welcome Lynn to the podium.
Well, good morning, everyone. How are you? It's so nice to see everyone, to see our Autry family and others and those that are streaming and on Zoom with all of us today. I know that the last 2 years have been very difficult for all of us, but things look like they're getting better, so happy to be here in person to see all of you today. So with that being said, I'm going to start by saying Yuhaaviatam, which in our Serrano language means hello. It's a warm greeting to a group of people, a large group, and when it's a singular person, it's Haminat. And that's the name of our magazine for San Manuel. If any of you have seen our magazine that San Manuel has put out there and issued, and the cover of it says Haminat, so keep that word in mind. And also, welcome to this year's inaugural for our great friend Marshall McKay Seminar. Such a great friend and such a great person and leader in all venues when it has to do with leadership and culture for all of us. And San Manuel, my tribe, is so happy to be one of the sponsors of today's seminar for Marshall McKay and honoring him and remembering him and all the work that he did. This effort is appropriately named, just as my friend Marshall McKay has wanted it, empowering Native knowledge. And for us as tribal members, tribal leaders, it's always an education for everyone, the general public, non-tribal organizations, to understand our issues, our culture. And when I am approached a lot of times by even elected officials, come to me recently and said, Lynn, so do all tribes speak the same language, like Spanish? I'm like, no. So that's still out there, and it's all about education, so we do what we can to continue to educate people. Marshall dedicated his life not to just preserving, but finding ways to enhance indigenous cultures and history throughout the country. He believed this was a way to properly acknowledge the existence and contributions of the first Americans. This was his interest above all else, to ensure that Native Americans were properly and respectfully recognized. That was always Marshall's passion. I am proud and honored to call Marshall McKay a friend, a mentor, a trusted confidant. We met back in the mid-'80s, '85. Marshall was our first chair of the California Nations Indian Gaming Association. I don't know if all of you are aware of that organization, but it's one of the largest gaming organizations in the state. But back in the day, when Marshall was the chair of that organization, it was not called California Nations Indian Gaming Association. It was called California Nevada Indian Gaming Association, because back in the '80s, when tribes started with bingo and getting the pull-tab machines which were not slot machines, all that changed where we were told that we didn't have an agreement or a compact with the state, and we could not have our meetings here. So we had to go across the border to Reno and have our CNIGA meetings there. And then once we got our agreements and compacts in the '90s, we changed it back to California Nations instead of California Nevada. And I know most don't know that, but that was back in the '80s. So I was involved at that time with Marshall and many other tribal leaders to get all of that changed with leadership from everyone to make it a team effort for all of our tribes to do what we do today. So as I had mentioned, I first met Marshall in the 1980s, and he led that association. And there were some very difficult challenges that we all faced at that time. And for those that have not followed gaming issues, if it were not for the California tribes, the leadership of Marshall McKay and other tribal leaders, we would not be engaged in tribal gaming today. Marshall was very much a leader who helped to shape the policy and political environment that ultimately supported tribal gaming. The leadership and political skills Marshall possessed were important to build unity among all of us, 109 federally recognized tribes in California. So for those of you that may not know, there are 568 tribes in the entire nation, and California is the one state that has the most tribes with 109 federally recognized tribes. There's now about, out of 109, about 68 that do have tribal gaming. The remaining do not. We have all gained so much on a number of issues because tribes were united. And we always say strength in numbers. We have to have that unity. We have to have a team effort to get things done, to educate the legislator, to educate those that will help and support us on our issue, to explain sovereignty, to explain what our culture is, because every tribe is different. Every tribe has their own language. Every tribe has their own culture. Tribal leaders have always agreed that there is strength in numbers, as I had just mentioned, and most effective when we educate our legislators on our issues. That unity among tribes was possible with Marshall McKay. With his influence, with his leadership, his mentorship, he treated every tribal leader with the highest of respect. Today, there is no better way to pay tribute to Marshall McKay than this seminar, which captures his true passions for tribal culture and history. Marshall was always looking for ways to empower the knowledge of indigenous people. Marshall believed that Native people are just as capable of addressing even the most complex issues and finding solutions to those issues, but people have to have an understanding of what the tribe's challenges are. After all, our ancestors solved complex problems and created effective ways to live off the land, to care for the land, and preserve the land so that we might also benefit. This is the character of Marshall. And today, I do have to mention this before I forget, I'm wearing this necklace that Marshall McKay and his tribe presented to me, oh gosh, probably maybe 15, 20 years ago when I had visited their tribe at Yocha, Dehe, but I wore this today special and means a lot to me because we are honoring our good friend today, Marshall McKay. So Marshall was very instrumental in my joining the Board of Trustees here at the Autry Museum of the America West. I was so happy when he had told me, because of my busy schedule, he said, Lynn, we need to have, another Native person on our board. Help me. We need to, educate and make people aware of what we are as a people, what we do, our culture, and preservation of our sovereignty rights. So I told Marshall, I said, okay, Marshall, I said, I'll do that. So I do have to recall, and it's been about 15 years now that I've been on the board, and Marshall and I work closely together. But my first retreat, I remember I met a lot of trustees who are still here today in this room and still on the board. But after dinner one night, I remember a group of about 10, 12 trustees after dinner said, Lynn, they pulled me aside, let's go outside here and we just want to learn more about the tribes. Can you educate us? And I was happy to do that. So we spent about 2 hours sitting outside and they were asking a lot of questions about the tribes and what we do as a tribe. And they were very, very happy because most didn't have any idea or didn't know the struggles and some of the things that we have to go through as Native people. So it was an opportunity for Marshall and I to educate and have those learn more about what we do as tribes. So Marshall, he opened the door too for joining the Autry board and other organizations. And I learned so much from Marshall and from all of you as trustees, our Autry family, as I call it, on the Autry board. And the knowledge helped me when I was asked to join the board of trustees for the National Museum of American Indian. Now, that's another board that Marshall was on and that he chaired, and he recruited me to also be on that board and do the same thing. So I did that. I got on the board, but there we have term limits of 6 years, and I served with Marshall on that board, and at one point was the secretary of the board, and Marshall was the chair, so we worked well together. So all of the knowledge from the Autry to the NMAI and all the other organizations that I've been involved with over the years has really helped me do what I do today with leadership with all the other tribal leaders. And this, again, was a result of Marshall's influence. So serving on that board with Marshall for 6 years at NMAI was so great. And as we know, Rick here was, with NMAI for a while as well, and then here at the Autry, so worked with Rick also. So today, the seminar is only the recent example of Marshall McKay and his influence and his leadership and his mentoring. We can use these seminars to help shape what we do in the ways that our museums present our Native culture, our history, and our art. These seminars can help us to be better guides to ensure that museums are not just showcases for ancient civilizations, but to become teachers of living indigenous cultures and our histories. I am so grateful to Marshall, and we are so grateful to Marshall for the trust he placed in me and to all of us as a colleague on the Board of Trustees, as a fellow tribal leader, and as someone who shared his passion to indigenous peoples and to our communities. I extend to you my sincere good wishes as you engage in the seminar and with the panelists today over the next 2 days. Thank you for inviting me to share and be here today with all of you to share my perspectives. Hakupa'ai, that in our language means thank you.